Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Lost Origin, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your order using that code, OmniPoke. For today's video, we're going to be going over the Yokohama 2023 Champions League tournament. This was an over 3,200 player event. That's absolutely absurd. So this gives us a really good look at the most successful winning decks in the Lost Origin meta. So this is going to give us a good insight into starting to prepare for the upcoming regional and other championships. So really important to see what's what. And the winning deck list was Giratina V-Star. Yes, it is not just a meme. This archetype is real, has a lot of strength behind it, and enough flexibility to tackle one prize decks in the format, as well as trade into other V-Star and even V-Max archetypes. So Giratina was the deck that took it all down. It's nothing too exceptional in the list. There's nothing too surprising here. I think some key notes would be there are water energies in the deck list so that you can use Radiant Greninja. Really important in one prize matchups. I think that's a massive takeaway. So you have Sableye, Greninja, Cramorant plus Ordinary Rod as this little one prize package that you can use for the majority of the game in other one prize matchups. So you can really try and cosplay as that one prize deck with literally the double crown, the Sableye, the Greninja, and one Rod. You can be a one prize deck because you can physically make 6 one prize Pokemon and your opponent go through them. So there can be games where the Giratina just doesn't even come out to play and you're still going to be effective as an archetype. Then we have the 3-3 Giratina, just as the beat stick when need be. Nothing too surprising here. We have seen sort of some 2-2 packages with Thornton, and I think that actually did well in a recent Singapore event over the weekend as well. So I think that's another alternative, really. But outside of this, just having the thick Giratina for perhaps games when you've gone first into other V-Star matchups and you can see that they've already put down some multiple prize Pokemon, you want to be threatening that Giratina as quickly as possible. Got a relatively high switch count, but obviously the Escape Rope is going to be an important card, so you can push the likes of Empoleon V out the way. Oranguru is also a really cool card to see in the deck list. It gives you a bit more control over your flower selecting and gives you really easy ways of lost zoning excess VIP passes, maybe Giratina pieces that are additional, or if you're in these one prize matchups, you can guarantee that these are going, so you're not getting rid of key cards, you know, the likes of Boss's Orders, Roxanne and whatnot. And even if you're doing it post all of your flower selecting to end your turn, you can bank a supporter card, for example, on the top of your deck, so you don't just get wrecked by Marnie, especially alongside Path to shut off your Greninja. That can give you that low hand size and not much to work with. So having a Oranguru banking supporters is always a pretty good idea as well. Outside of that, pretty routine deck, having the Tool Jammer in here to maybe make your guys that little bit tankier, shut off opposing. Air Balloons is a reasonable choice here. Just a couple copies of Boss's Orders, a little bit low on that side of things, but you do have the control of damage counters with Sableye as well to possibly finish things off that have retreated to the bench. So this is definitely going to be a list people will be trying out and copy-pasting, and it seems to be pretty straightforward and strong, but with enough flexibility, enough ways to pivot from a one-prize deck into a two-prize deck when need be, so that's always awesome. Then we have a just pure one-prized Lost Zone sort of toolbox here. It's not that boxy, to be honest, because it's not playing Mirage Gate. It's actually heavy on the Cram, really heavy on the Sableye. 3 copies of Sableye. So this is a get to 10 as quickly as possible list. You can see 3 Switch Cart, 4 Escape Rope, 2 Balloon, and 4 Net with Pokestops. So this is really just dance your Comphase deck, get to 10 as quickly as possible, and then you can start sprinkling throughout the entire game. There is the, I think this is, I can't remember what the trainer's called, but she is essentially a gusting effect. This would be essentially the only Boss's Order style effect that the deck has. It can only gust up 2 prize Pokemon, but that's fine. I think it's exactly V Pokemon, yeah. And you have the Palpad that can help out there to recycle it if need be. But what I like is it's a Charizard rinse and repeat deck. I was playing double Clara in my initial deck list of this that's already on the channel, and this list actually isn't that too far away. I feel like the Pokestops is kind of the bigger innovation, where I was leaning into Basin to try and use the Zard earlier and using like Choice Belts and whatnot. This is going to be much more set up with Sableye, get everything with 3 damage counters on it the entire time, so then the Lizard can come in and just deal that 250, which is plenty in those later stages. Again, we're seeing Roxanne in the deck list. Because, you know, we've just seen the other Lost Zone engine. All of these are just based on, you know, flower selecting the entire time and have no other real engine Pokemon, nothing like Bibarel to fall back on. So the Roxanne is very effective in Lost Zone mirror match situations where you can force people into awkward positions. The Charizard's also really good in these sort of 1 prize v 1 prize matchups because Cram doesn't hit for weakness, so that 160 hit points is very chunky. There's triple Echoing Horn in here as well, so you really are trying to capitalize on the likes of Comfey being in a ton of deck lists. Just keep bringing it back and knocking it out with Sableye each turn. It's like a guaranteed prize, so all you need to do is rinse and repeat your Sableye, actually, and then the Zard is that late-game sweeper. So very, very effective strategy here. The full 4 ropes again, respecting early Empoleons, etc. Having the double Lost Vacuum to, again, get rid of annoying stadium cards if need be. Such as, obviously, Path of the Peak, because you need your Zard online, and also just fueling that Lost Zone for you as quickly as possible. So, yes, Sableye, the main emphasis of this deck list. My main focus has been like a Choice Belt list, where the Cramorant is doing more damage early, and then the Zard does the 280, but the Sableye being the real star of the show here. And even just having a Zigzagoon is such a big deal for the Sableye as well, because that 12 counters being augmented by 1 or 2 Headbutt Tantrums, if you can net it as well, is so good at dealing with multiple Comfeys, and there's a lot of 70 hit point stuff in the meta right now. So seeing a Radzard build of the Cram is definitely something I'm going to explore more, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it to be in this sort of rendition, but this is really just a let me get to 10 as quickly as possible build, which is really cool to see, and the very thick Sableye, even with the recovery, shows that this is definitely the emphasis of the list. And you can see the lovely the trophy card there as well. Awesome to see. The senior champion was a Mew V Max deck list. And nothing too crazy with this one. There is a collapsed stadium, which we don't see too much of. You can see a split of Boss's Orders and this, I believe it's Serena. I'm punting with that name. But I think that's what it is. And the Palpad, still having the Fusion Energy, which has been a bit of a contentious debate these days. We saw a lot of quad DTE builds doing well over some of the recent regionals. But this one still has the Meloetta Sparkle available to it, has the Silene for some recycle as well, has the Lost Vacuum, which I think is a really good card in Mew as well, because it can be a -2 in the worst case scenario. It can essentially be a damage modifier as well if you're targeting Tool Jammers or not Choice Belts, what's it called? Tool Jammers or Big Charms. So you can have not only a Stadium Bounce, but also the flexibility of a tool removal in your deck list to make sure that you're covered nicely against good old Path of the Peak. And then you are playing the Lost Cities in here to try and punish heavy use of Charizard, use of Drapion, Reggie decks as well. So it feels like the Lost City is here to stay. I'm really surprised by the collapsed. I guess this is just more defense against Reggies, but you'd think the Silene and the Lost City would be enough. So I'm surprised this isn't a Rose Tower, but here we are. Really nice result from a Shoe list as well. A pretty speedy build, all things considered, with Mew here winning the senior event. And then we have, back to Masters Division, we have in top 4, Palkia Inteleon, still certainly a very strong archetype. Not really much changed with the list, to be honest. It's making space for a 3rd Stadium card that collapsed. I'm actually not seeing any Empoleon, and I was really expecting Empoleon to be a bit of a mainstay in Palkia going forward, but I guess if every Comfey is going to play 3 or 4 ropes regardless, is it even that good unless you want to commit to 2 copies? And that's a big investment in your deck space, especially for an archetype like this, where you need to commit so much into your Inteleon pieces. So this is not too dissimilar to Palkia Intels that we've seen. Honestly, this is looking pretty streamlined and straightforward. Not too much to say. You all know what's going on with Palkia Intel at this point, and we know that Japan has typically favoured the Candy Capture over the Quad VIP Pass builds, and this is really in line with that. I think the only real spicy card, again, is like the Collapse that's come in, and that could be an alternative way outside of Empoleon to help deal with Reggies, and can be, you know, sometimes annoying in Mirror and can do some other stuff. So a bit of a flexible card there doing well. Interesting to see Collapse doing well in the top 4 and in the in the seniors winning deck list. Maybe it's an underexplored card in our format. Also, we have another Palkia Inteleon. Here we don't see any bats or fish or anything like that. No backup attackers outside of literally just the Intel pieces, the Greninja and the Palkia. There's this Articuno here. I don't actually know what it does. I can see it does 70 for 2. So I imagine this could just be some sort of Comfey one prize answer of some description. I'm not sure what the attack text is on this Articuno. Could even be used as just a one prize Pokemon in those early stages to like set up V-Star Pokemon. You never really know. But again, all in keeping with what we've seen previously here. This is more straightforward, more like what we see in the majority of our deck lists. I think the question mark is just this Articuno promo, which I'm not sure about. May not even be a promo, maybe just a card we haven't seen yet. And then we just have more Palkia Inteleon. Is there any other cool and spicy list? I think there's lots of... Here we go. We have another top 8 Palkia. So Palkia still has all the answers this time, making space for the Big Charm and the Temple of Sinnoh as well. We have some Mew VMAX with the Deoxys in here. I think Deoxys might be creeping back into some Mews just because it can withstand a Cram attack. So that's something to bear in mind. You can, of course, DTE Fusion, use the Deoxys to deal with one prize Pokemon. It does 160 as well, so if you can... there is a reduction, of course, of DTE, but if you can, like, tablet, you can get through even, like, Snorlaxes and stuff, so that's kind of cool. Again, the Lost City is definitely the choice for Mews, and this was something I wasn't really forecasting, to be honest, but it seems to be the way that Mew is going these days. Obviously, Mew's only recovery is via Silene, so you have no downside to your own stuff getting put into the Lost Zone. The discard pile is essentially the same thing for Mew, so there's no downside in that, and you can punish some one prizes that way around. So that's really cool. We have a Rotom V-Star in top 8. Do we have the deck list? Ooh, I really want to see this one. I'm just clicking randomly on Twitter now. This is dangerous on a live video. I can't see a deck list, but yeah, Rotom V-Star. I don't think it's a card we're getting, obviously, anytime soon, so it's a shame that we can't see that. There's also a Lost Zone build with the Celebrations Kyogre, which can mill the top 5 cards of your deck, and you do 50 times the amount of energy that you discard to 2 different targets. So this can be a big finisher in the Lost Zone deck. I've actually tried this out, where you try and mill yourself to the very bottom of your deck, then you do a combination of like Ordinary Rod plus Energy Recycler, so then you can Mirage Gate, attach, and then recycle 5 energies as like your entire deck, so your finishing move is then 250 damage snipes with a one prize Pokemon that can be bursted all in a turn. So that's very cheeky. We've got this Zygarde as well, looking like a fighting tech include. The Crabominable is an interesting tech include in here as well. I think, again, the flexibility of Sableye allows you to then have this burst potential of Crabominable doing its second attack once you've just sprinkled like 3 or 4 counters on even bigger stuff. They just get knocked out by the crab. So this is just more flexibility with the Lost Zone engine, which is awesome to see. A lot of these Palkias, none of them are playing the Empoleon, which is surprising. I imagine it's very much like a Western thing for us to commit to countering certain archetypes. We seem to just sort of want to always counter popular engines in the West, so I feel like the Palkia is just doing its own thing in Japan, and I guess in best of 1 it's more important to just have the most consistent 60 possible, but I feel like when we're looking for like 6-2-1 records, we very often try and counter meta by like diluting our decks with techs, and I feel like Comfey is just a menace in the game right now, so having answers for that is going to be important. We see another Mirage Gate box build, this time having the Raikou and the Drapion in here, as well as the gusting effect from this new supporter. The upshot of this supporter is obviously it can draw you cards as well. I think it's like a Sightseer effect. You have the choice of either a Gust or a Sightseer effect from this card, so just adding to the relatively low support count is such a big include here. But again, you have bench control with the Sableye and the Greninja because you play water energies. You have Raikou to burst through some Palkia. You have those crams and the double lax and the triple rod, so you can reload the right one in the right occasion, I guess is the kind of idea here. You have Ice Cube and you can net up the remainder of your board if you're up against Regis, and then you're just block facing every turn and they can't do anything. So that's kind of cool as well. Looks like more of the toolboxy builds. This time it's got a Zapdos in here as well. So I imagine we will see some sort of mixed 1 and 2 prize builds as well of these boxes. And the final thing I want to show is this the meta breakdown of day 1. Looks like the Giratina was the highest played deck, and this was split between the pure Lost Zone build, but also the Arceus builds of Giratina. I imagine the Lost Zone build would have been more popular, and definitely, you know, the winning list was a Lost Zone build, so I imagine going into the next set of tournaments, the Lost Zone build will be the preference, but also an Arceus Tina is definitely something on my radar, because just, you can't say no to the consistency of Starbirth a lot of the time. Just look at the results of Arceus since it's come out. It's always performing very well in droves. We have Palkia, we have the sort of Lost Zone boxes going on, pretty popular, as popular as the Mew. We have the Zoroark here as well, which popular but isn't really that successful, at least looking at the top 8s. So definitely an interesting archetype. It's kind of hit the ground running in online tournaments, and people have been trying all sorts of different ways. I do quite like Zoroark as like a racing deck, and it has the space to play double Empoleon possibly. So it may end up in that sort of middle ground of being pretty decent into Tina and Lost Box, just by playing double Empoleon and like a good amount of Melanies. But then also being able to race into Palkia. But maybe it's a little bit too linear to beat Palkia often enough. We'll have to see. And then Regis was still a little bit popular, but I think Regis has to be a little bit afraid of definitely Mew if you're just going to get countered by these Lost Cities. And you've always been kind of like okay into Palkia, not that good. And you're also not great into the Lost Zone boxes, I think, because they can simply chain Sableye and knock out an Alecki every single turn. That's really bad for you. Especially if they play Zigzagoon, it means that even if you're holding pieces, they can still get you on 130 hit point Pokemon and such. So I feel like Gigas is usually just slower out the gates than the Lost Zone boxes also. So I think you're a little bit bad in those sorts of matchups. They can even try and set up Sprinkle turns to then use like Greninja for 290 damage snipes and such. So yeah, there's a lot can go wrong for Regis against the Lost Box. And if they're playing Articunos as well, they just race you way better. So yeah, that seems to be the main decks being played in this Champions League in Yokohama. And it was Giratina that took it all down in the end. And Lost Box is really selling right now. It's really making a good account of itself. I feel like the Sableye is one of the biggest punishers of the Inteleon engine. So Inteleon low-key is kind of getting pushed out at the end of its life cycle before rotation, because it can get so heavily punished. And towards that sort of mid to late game, you're not allowed to put down Sobbles anymore. And that used to be one of the biggest selling points, right? That if ever you were Marnied or Roxanne or whatnot, you were just a level ball away from still getting any card you wanted and still mounting a comeback. Well, kind of the Lost Zone engine makes a mockery of that and really punishes a Sobble coming into play, especially if they're playing 3 Echoing Horn. They're just going, give it back, let me Sableye Sprinkle and detonate you. So that's a really interesting dynamic in the metagame. So awesome to see a huge size event. We've already also just had the largest US regional ever. I think it was 60 players less than the NAIC, which is absurd. So I'm expecting more high stakes, many player events. And I can't wait to get into this Lost Origin meta. Let me know what you guys have been testing. Let me know what decks you want to see next on the channel. And yeah, really cool update. And I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.